Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, along with the wonderful wife, Janet, and we are streaming live from the Team Needham Abode podcast studio. And we are super excited to be talking about one of our passions, something that we talk about all day, every day, hormones today. And today we're going to be focusing on Premarin and Provera. Now, because Janet and I have a passion for this subject and we could talk literally for days about it, with no interruptions. We're probably going to get distracted and get sidetracked a little bit, but we're going to start off talking about why not to take Premarin and Provera. First of all, let me describe what Premarin is, and then I'll let Janet go into Provera. So Premarin is, it stands for literally, they taught assistant pharmacy school 30 years ago. They used to teach physicians this 30 years ago. They don't teach this anymore. So when you ask most doctors or pharmacists nowadays what Premarin stands for, they don't know. And here's why. Because it literally stands for pregnant mare's urine. Yes, Premarin is horse pee. It is literally horse pee. They take estrogens, isolate estrogens out of horse pee. So it's a combination of estrogens. We know of at least 19 different estrogens in there, but there's a lot more than that. Many of them are not natural to women. They're natural to horses, one of those being equine, and I could see that being a problem possibly. But what they do is they impregnate horses, get them pregnant, and then isolate their urine, and then abort the foals. No kidding. It's a horrible practice. Premarin, that alone is one reason Premarin should never be prescribed. But the other reason is because we have an alternative. We have a bioidentical hormones, which are estradiol, estrone, and estriol. So Premarin was the first estrogen that was ever prescribed back in 1947. There will never be a generic of it. So they've made billions and billions and billions of dollars on it. And the reason there'll never be a generic is because they don't even know what is in Premarin. So it's hard to copy something when they don't know what's in it. So Wyeth Ayers has a wonderful drug that will never, ever be copied, and they can keep on a brand name, and it won't go generic. So Janet, talk about Provera.
Okay, so many doctors and pharmacists and nurses and patients get this wrong. Provera is a progestin. It is not a progesterone. And the reason I'm spelling that out to you is because progestins like Provera are not natural to our body. They are way different. Provera came out because Wyeth realized that women were getting too thick of lining and developing cancer or uterine cancer when they were just on Premarin alone. So they knew about progesterone and what it did for our body, and what natural progesterone does is it keeps the lining in check. So the endometrium lining does not get too thick and build up. Well, so they had a problem. They needed to keep Premarin working for them to keep the sale going, but they knew they needed to come up with something to help with the problem of too much of a lining being built up in women developing uterine cancer. So they came up with Provera. Provera is very close to the natural product in the structure of it, but when it's in the human body, it is so different. So for example, we will use injectable Provera for birth control. But progesterone, the natural hormone that your ovaries make, actually maintains a pregnancy, and it's required to be on board for a pregnancy to be healthy and to go the full length. So many times today, we have women that have been started out on Premarin and Provera. Prempro was the thing that came out when Shawn and I were in school. And it's still on the market. And it probably, to me, is one of the worst hormones out there. There's probably a few more, but it's one of the worst because it absolutely does nothing for your bones. It does nothing to help you with sleep, which progesterone does. It does keep the uterine lining down when you're on Premarin, but it's not natural.
And it doesn't work in the breast like
no, it's not protective
either.
to the breast.
Right. And just remember that small changes in a structure in chemically can make huge differences in the body. I mean, for instance, testosterone and estrogen, estradiol, are pretty close in structure. But think about that. If you have enough testosterone, you'll be a man. So that's how different they are in the body. They're 3D structures, and they need to work in a lock and key type mechanism. So a little bit of a change is going to make a huge difference in the body. And Janet brought up the biggest one. So this is what I want you to know, and you will know more than what she already said it, but I want to reiterate it. Write this down. If you know that Provera, which is a generic medroxyprogesterone acetate, which is a class of drugs, progestin, if you know that that is not equivalent to progesterone, you will know more than most doctors and most pharmacists do about hormones. I'm not kidding you. And if a doctor ever says, well, they're close to the same, ask them, why is Depo-Provera used for birth control? And progesterone, by its name, progesterone, pro support gestation, by its name, is a hormone of pregnancy and helps to support a pregnancy. So that's how different they are. One is used for birth control, one is used to support a pregnancy. So please question your doctor about that when they say Provera or medroxyprogesterone acetate is close to progesterone. Now, here's another misnomer, and I want Janet to go into this. Janet, is it true that if you don't have a uterus, you don't need progesterone?
So I was even talking to a doctor about this over the weekend. It is something that we were taught in pharmacy school because they realized that after a certain point, Provera was not very helpful to a woman. So they would stop it after 5 years. Well, then they came up with, if we remove the uterus or we have a hysterectomy, then we don't need Provera on board. And I agree with that statement, but not progesterone. And here's why. Every cell in our body has receptors for bioidentical hormones. We have receptors for estrogen, testosterone, DHEA, progesterone. And here's the thing. Natural progesterone is not just for reproduction. It is much more than that. Progesterone helps you to have a healthy sleep cycle. So when you are going through peri and menopause, many women are struggling with sleep. And the reason that is happening is because progesterone is the first hormone that starts dropping off as we are aging. Well, sleep is king. And Shawn and I have talked about this many times over and over again. People have to have healthy sleep patterns to be a healthy individual. And if you're not sleeping, you're not healthy, period, because your body is not repairing. So if we want to be healthy, we want to sleep. So progesterone helps us with that. It also helps us protect with our breast. It helps our breast tissue. But also, one of my passions is that it helps to build new bone. It tells our body to make new osteoblasts. So if we are putting new bone down rather than holding on to old bone, which pharmaceutical companies do with Fosamax and all those other Prolia and those products, we want new healthy cells in our body. It also calms the body. Provera does nothing for that for us. So it balances our estrogen and testosterone and hormones, and it gives us a calming effect. So you don't get that from Provera. You don't get that from progestins, such as some of the birth control pills that are out on the market, or what's the IUD?
Marina.
You don't get that from the progestins like Provera and birth control pills. You don't get that. And that's huge. Progesterone, calming, protective, making more bones, and sleep.
In fact, the birth control pills and the Mirena IUD or IUDs, any kind of hormonal birth control pills or any kind of hormonal birth control, they do just the opposite. They stop your own endogenous production. They stop your body from producing hormones. So your hormone levels actually go lower. And that's why women get all kinds of side effects when they take birth control, hormonal birth control, because their hormones are gone. So they get insomnia. So what does the doctor do?
Sleep. Give them sleep pills.
Yeah, right. They get depressed. So what does the doctor do?
Antidepressants.
Right. They can get psychosis. So they give them antipsychotic medications for bipolar. They get anxiety. So what do? They give them a benzodiazepine, lorazepam, Xanax to calm them down. It's like, you can't make this up. And the reality of it is they need to stop the hormone of birth control. And, that's one of the class of drugs that Janet and I would never, ever recommend that a woman takes is hormonal birth control, because we see the short-term and the long-term consequences of this. Short-term is the problems we just talked about, but long-term, infertility. Women go off them and they can't get pregnant, especially the Mirena IUD. Think about it. It stays in your body. It's something that's implanted in your body for 5 years. Think about the Depo-Provera injection. It's something that you get an injection every 90 days. We've seen people go off it, and for 2 years, they still have irregular periods and they can't get pregnant. Something that is in your body that long cannot be good.
No, and to touch on this a little bit more, I'm frightened to think of how we've impacted so many women in our country, because for myself, I know women my age, we started our birth control when we were in our 20s, and we were told, oh, it's safe. It's really safe, right? Well, if we look at how it does affect our body it puts us in early menopause, for example. So what does that do to our muscle tissue and our bone tissue and our brain tissue? That's the scary thing. We know estradiol that our body normally makes is super important for our brain health and our thinking ability. It helps us with brain fog, so we don't have that. We know testosterone helps women with libido and maintaining good bones and muscle mass. So we've deprived women of hormones forever with a synthetic estrogen and a synthetic progesterone, or progestin, excuse me. And we've said, oh, it's safe and it's okay. But the fallout to me is going to be and is really sad, because most people don't even think about that. We consider these things to be safe because we were told, well, it's safe. You can take this safely. For how long? For how long? If we read the package insert like Shawn and I used to do, the complications and the side effects are listed. They're there. It's just that we believe that they are safe. So I would never recommend any person going on a birth control pill, period.
Yeah. And we want to talk about Premarin again. So is Premarin natural?
Yeah.
That's right.
It is.
It isn't. It's natural to a horse.
Right.
That doesn't mean it's natural to our bodies.
No.
So if a doctor or a pharmacist or some healthcare professional or anybody says, well, Premarin's natural, I'm sure it is. It's natural to a horse. The analogy that I use with Premarin is, we used to use beef and pork insulin because that's all we had. Right. And then in 1983, Eli Lilly actually basically did the first biotech drug, really, and with recombinant DNA technology made human insulin. They used a Escherichia coli or E. coli bacteria to replicate human insulin. And once we had human insulin, we didn't need to prescribe the pork and the beef insulin anymore, which was essentially insulin isolated from the pancreases of cows and pigs. That's all we had. We didn't prescribe anymore. And the reason we didn't is because we didn't need to.
Right.
So it's just proof that, and Premarin, we have an alternative for. We have estradiol, we have estrone, yet we still prescribe Premarin. And I think part of the reason is, well, not part of the reason is just money. It's a drug that'll never be generic, and they make billions of dollars on it still today.
So I wouldn't.
Excuse me.
We talked about estrone a little bit naturally. Bless you. I would never recommend estrone to anybody. It's the breakdown, but estriol is one that we do recommend quite often in estradiol. So let's talk about Premarin in the safety and efficacy in our body. Does it do the job? There is estradiol in it. And yes, it can help. I'm not saying it doesn't. But like Shawn is saying, why would we put something in our body that has so many different types of estrogen in it that aren't natural to the human body? And we don't really study how those affect us. Why wouldn't we just use what is identical to a human, such as estradiol and estriol? And I agree with the statement that we don't do that with insulin. We grab human insulin, not pork or pig anymore. So, that to me is really important. And one of the other things that we talk about with Premarin and Provera quite often is the WHI study, because everybody throws that out there to say, well, hormones aren't safe. Hormones cause cancer. Hormones cause cardiovascular disease. Hormones are bad for us. In fact, I have patients every day being told hormones are bad. Well, quite frankly, if you didn't have hormones in your body, you'd be dead.
Right. And
it's a fake, it's a lie.
right.
It's a myth.
And the WHI study talks about Premarin and Provera.
Correct.
It doesn't talk about bioidentical hormones like estradiol and progesterone. I do want to clear up some stuff that's been in the media a lot lately. So Dr. Mary, Claire Haven, she is an OBGYN, she's an OBGYN. She wrote a book, the New Menopause book. And I'm glad she's getting the information out there about menopause. Here's the problem. So she is looked at as an expert on hormones. And here's part of the problem is she talked about the Mirena IUD being progesterone. So that is the ignorance of most doctors. And she's considered an expert. She's been on Oprah. So as you can imagine, she got really popular.
Sure.
The problem is there's a lot of stuff that she says that is just outright wrong. And that's one of them. She talks about Mirena being progesterone. And she also talks about not needing progesterone if you don't need a uterus, if you don't have a uterus. And those are things that we want to clear up. Again, I'm glad she's getting the information out there, but there's a lot of misinformation out there too. She also talks about things like FDA approval and insurance acceptance, things like that, because she accepts insurance. And you guys know that what we believe in is that health insurance is a racket. Any doctor that bills insurance is working for the insurance company, not the patient. So anytime a doctor says something about FDA approval, or that, it's covered on insurance, well, are they prescribing the right thing, or are they prescribing the best thing, or are they just prescribing what's covered on insurance? So those are two red flags, and one of the things that I'm cautious about her. Again, I appreciate her getting the information out about menopause.
Yeah, so I listened to a few things, and there's many points I agree on. She talks about women needing to maintain new bone or good bones and muscle mass. And I totally agree with that, especially as we have went through our life, at least women my age, where we were on the pill forever. We do need to do something about our bones and muscle. But you can't do it through the synthetics that are out there. They're not going to work. So she talks about using androgel, and androgel is made for men. It's been studied for men.
It's FDA approved for men.
And androgel does have testosterone in it. But here's my beef with this one. A quarter of a pump, a half a pump, a 3/4 of a pump. Seriously? That doesn't work out. And then she is very negative towards compounding pharmacies because she says their products are not FDA approved. Okay, yes, if I make a cream, it's not FDA approved, but testosterone is.
The ingredient is.
The ingredients that come from the wholesaler, from the chemical wholesaler, are approved. Here's the problem with using androgel. If I have a woman that has bad pelvic floor, or she has urinary tract problems, I can't use androgel locally to the vaginal tissue because it has an alcohol base. That would be horrible. But if you have a good cream, you can use it vaginally, you can use it topically in different areas, and you can get the correct dose, not a quarter or a half a pump. To me, that is just mind-blowing. We're talking about something that isn't even approved for women, and yet she's tagging on this FDA thing. Well, of course it went to the market for men, but women do need testosterone. I agree, but let's put it in a form that women can use and not use it in an awkward way. And then on top of it, if you're going to be billing insurance, let's be honest, insurance does not cover androgel for women.
Yeah, so why is she bragging about
Right.
insurance coverage on these products, which that alone is a red flag to me. And just to reiterate what she said about compound pharmacies, she mostly said that they're unregulated. Well, I can tell you from owning a compounding pharmacy, we are very highly regulated by state boards of pharmacy and by the FDA. Our products are not FDA approved. That does not mean we're not regulated by the FDA. So it's just pure ignorance on her part. And I think if you follow her enough, I don't necessarily recommend you do or don't. You can check her out, definitely do. You'll understand where she's coming from. She sells supplements online. She sells a lot of supplements. She promotes a lot of supplements, and she likes to sell her book. No problem with that. I've got a book, and we sell supplements at our pharmacy. Here's where I think it's different. I don't sit there and tell patients about FDA approval and unregulated products that aren't FDA approved through compounding pharmacies, and then sell supplements that are not FDA approved or are not regulated by the FDA. So it kind of sounds like she has a double standard, or kind of hypocritical to me when she talks about things like that.
Okay, so one other point, because we're on this and we're talking about products like Premarin and Provera. Well, many times in the past, and we still do this now, we don't always use products to help people with their cycling correctly. So right now, what you'll see is women, if you're in perimenopause and you have heavy bleeding, we just put you on a pill, a birth control pill. Well, that doesn't solve the problem. The problem is you really need progesterone. So if you don't get the progesterone, the next step is what happens is you get a hysterectomy.
No, usually uterine ablation.
Oh, that's right. The
Right.
ablation step.
And this is if you're over 40 or getting close to 40.
Right.
Under 40, they just do birth control pills. But over 40, this is what they do. Go ahead.
So, okay, we do the pill, we do the ablation, and then we do the hysterectomy. Well, many women don't need to have that happen. They need to have progesterone to get that cycle working properly and feel good. So now we got this path that insurance is paying for. And OBGYNs make money doing procedures. She makes money by doing hysterectomies. No doubt we could have corrected that if you had the right physician on board that understood hormones without having to have a surgery. Okay, well, what's the big deal? It's convenient. You don't have to worry about your cycle anymore, right? It'll be fine. We'll save your ovaries and we'll keep that working for you. Well, folks, they're removing tissue the size of your fist. How do you think that plays out when you age? Well, your pelvic floor changes because you don't have that much tissue there. So everything starts falling. And then they think that those ovaries are going to work for you for the next 5 years. Well, folks, you're lucky if it works for maybe a year, because you take all the blood supply from your ovaries out. It takes away the source of blood. So your ovaries aren't going to work as good as they said they were. And then you have prolapse issues as we age. So your body starts coming out. Then you have urinary tract issues and bladder issues. So that procedure it's just, you won't have to worry about your bleeding. Well, I'd rather worry about having a cycle. I'd rather fix my cycle than I would have my body parts being, prolapsing as I age, and then end up like my mom did with a catheter. So, and they never tell you about what's going to really happen. Most don't, let's say that. And by all the studies that are put out and all the reading and classes that I've went to, the average person that has a hysterectomy loses about 10 years off their life.
So think about that when a doctor says, well, it'll be convenient. You won't have to deal with your periods anymore.
Very convenient.
Do you want to deal with the bladder mesh? Do you want to deal with, the prolapse that Janet was talking about? Do you want to deal with a catheter later on? Not to mention all the problems with your ovaries not working as well anymore. So I'm a pretty big believer that we should probably preserve body parts, that our body parts were meant to stay for a reason. They're not just for reproduction. So I think we were created pretty wonderfully. So I'm a believer in preserving those things.
So if this did happen to you, you got to get in and see a pelvic floor therapist, and you need to get hormones in. Testosterone is amazing as to helping with that pelvic floor, but it's unfortunate because many times we listen to experts and they're telling us about what they're doing, but they don't tell about what the downfall is, what's happening down the road. And I honestly think between birth control pills and hysterectomies, we've done women absolutely no favors.
I believe, this coming from me as a pharmacist, my opinion, I believe that most hysterectomies have been unnecessary. I think, and just realize this too, that it's a hormonal issue that can be balanced. Realize this too, if a doctor tells you that you need a hysterectomy, it's probably not an emergency. I mean, unless you were bleeding to death right then and there, it's probably not an emergency. So please do your own research and think about it before you do it. And many times doctors try to fear people and saying, you got to do this right now. Don't believe that. You have options. So it looks like we have some comments coming through. Let's see. Deborah Fashion. Yikes, the hysterectomy dealio. I'm in that mix. Who would you recommend on the pelvic floor and progesterone? Deb, I'm not sure where you're at. Will you go ahead and, thank you for your question, by the way. Will you go ahead and reach out to me and message me on Facebook, which is where you commented, and try to do it at my personal account, because that's the one I checked, not the business account. So try to message me on our personal account, and I will communicate with you more. So appreciate the question. Please, if anybody has any other questions, please keep the questions coming. We love answering questions. And that being said, we can't stream live on Instagram on this platform. So we do have a way to, once a week, we have an Instagram live where we do a questions and answers with pharmacists. And we do it we'll be doing it today at 3 p.m. And it's a great way to have any questions answered about anything healthcare. No subject is off topic. The reason we started doing that is because our Instagram went viral when I did a few videos on what drugs I would not take as a pharmacist. And one of them got 3.6 million views. One of them got 1.3 million views. And some of the drug, the birth control pills is one of the drugs that was on there. So go, follow us on Instagram, Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, and check out our IG Live. We do it every Thursday at 3 p.m. depending on our schedule. And that's where you can get a lot of questions answered also. So we do stream this podcast twice a week, usually on Mondays, 12:30 to 1:30 Pacific Standard Time, and on Thursdays, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We stream on Facebook, we stream on LinkedIn, we stream on YouTube, X, and Rumble. So anybody that doesn't have Facebook or those certain platforms, please share it with them in other platforms. Like it, share it, comment on it. We really appreciate it. We couldn't be doing this podcast without you guys. We're going on our 600th episode here shortly, and we are just super excited to be educating and empowering individuals to take charge of their own health. That's been our goal from day one. So I think we're going to wrap this podcast up. Janet, how do you want to end this podcast?
So if your doctor still prescribing Premarin and Provera, tell them there's something better that's been out longer.
Share this podcast with them.
Exactly. Because we are women, not horses, and we deserve to have the hormones that our body endogenously make. And if you are that person that is getting the push to go in to have surgery for a hysterectomy, take your time. Unless you are bleeding to death, unless it's a true medical emergency, we don't have to make an immediate decision. Look at your options, research it. Don't be the paycheck for somebody, because I honestly believe it's just convenience for some people. It's like that's what they do. And I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm just saying that, that's what they do for a living. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's right for you. Take your time, do your own research.
And the way I'd like to end up on this one, talking about hysterectomies, I would like to make an analogy with women versus men. So all you women that are listening out there, think about this. I hope we are beyond, unfortunately we're not, but I wish we were beyond the subject that, your uterus and your ovaries are just for making babies. I hope we're beyond that, but I don't think we are. So, but if your doctor does tell you this, ask them this. Say, well, men have body parts too for making babies. Do we cut their body parts out? No, we don't. And I don't think that would be acceptable. Nobody would accept that. But yet we've accepted it as standard of care for women for the last 50 years. And I don't think we need to. So
Nope.
That about wraps up our podcast. Thank you for listening to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Tune in Monday to our regularly scheduled podcast, 12:30 to 1:30 Pacific Standard Time. Thank you for listening.